The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, taped to the apartment door like a public execution announcement. 30 days to vacate. The landlord had been patient, the letter explained, but 3 months of unpaid rent had exhausted all goodwill. Chen stood in the hallway with the notice trembling in her hands while her 6-year-old daughter Lily tugged at her sleeve, asking if they were moving again. Maya's throat closed around words she couldn't form. This was the 4th apartment in 2 years. Each move had promised stability. Each promise had dissolved under the weight of medical bills that never stopped coming. Lily's chronic asthma required medications that insurance covered poorly and emergency room visits that it didn't cover at all. The prescriptions alone consumed what most people spent on rent. The nebulizer treatments, the specialist appointments, the panic at 3 in the morning when Lily's breathing turned shallow. These were expenses that didn't negotiate or wait for better circumstances. She had worked 3 part-time jobs simultaneously at one point, stitching together shifts at a coffee shop, a bookstore, and weekend data entry that paid barely above minimum wage. None offered benefits. None provided enough hours to qualify for health insurance that might actually help. She'd applied for assistance programs, navigated bureaucratic mazes designed to exhaust applicants into giving up, sat in waiting rooms for 6 hours only to be told she made $37 too much per month to qualify. The mathematics of poverty were precise and unforgiving. Every dollar earned pushed her closer to disqualification from the few programs that might help, while simultaneously being insufficient to actually survive without them. She existed in a gap between too poor to manage and too solvent to receive aid. Watching Lily's medical needs consume everything while the world insisted she simply wasn't trying hard enough. Maya folded the eviction notice carefully and placed it in the kitchen drawer with the other impossible documents. Overdue utility bills, final payment warnings, collection agency letters written in the aggressive language of people who believe poverty was a moral failing rather than a systemic design. She made Lily a sandwich with the last of the peanut butter and wondered, not for the first time, if her daughter would be better off in a home where money wasn't a constant, crushing presence. The thought arrived unbidden and unwelcome, but it persisted. What kind of mother couldn't provide basic stability? What kind of life was this, where a 6-year-old had learned to recognize the sound of her mother crying in the bathroom at night and knew better than ask about it? Her phone buzzed. A text from her older brother Marcus, brief and characteristic. Uncle Raymond died last night. Heart attack. Funeral Saturday. No flowers. Maya stared at the message until the screen went dark. Uncle Raymond, her father's younger brother, the family eccentric who'd lived alone in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens for 40 years. He'd worked as a municipal clerk, filed paperwork for the city, attended family gatherings with clockwork regularity, and said very little that anyone remembered. He'd never married, never had children, existed on the periphery of family stories without ever becoming the subject of one. She'd seen him perhaps a dozen times in her life. Thanksgiving dinners where he sat quietly at the end of the table. A cousin's wedding where he'd arrived exactly on time and left exactly when appropriate. He'd given her a savings bond for her high school graduation, $25 that had seemed like a joke at the time, but which she'd cashed years later to pay for Lily's first emergency room visit. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday morning at a cemetery in Queens that specialized in efficiency rather than sentiment. Maya borrowed bus fare from her neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, an elderly Polish woman who'd been slipping Lily cookies and Maya $20 bills with increasing frequency. The gesture carried more kindness than Maya could repay, and the weight of that debt added to all the others she was collecting. Saturday arrived gray and cold. Maya dressed Lily in the only outfit that still fit properly, a hand-me-down from a church donation box that was slightly too large but clean. Her own clothes were professional enough to pass for respectful. A black blouse purchased from a thrift store 3 years ago, slacks that had been mended twice at the knees. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and saw exhaustion rendered in human form. 32 years old and already worn down to essential components. The bus ride took 90 minutes. Lily pressed her face against the window, watching the city transform from cramped apartment blocks to slightly less cramped row houses. She asked questions that Maya answered automatically. Why was Uncle Raymond dead? Where do people go when they die? Would they have sandwiches at the funeral? The chapel was smaller than Maya expected. 15 people scattered among pews that could seat 100. Her brother Marcus sat in the front row with his wife Jennifer, both dressed in expensive black that announced their success more effectively than words ever could. Marcus worked in finance, something involving derivatives and risk management that Maya had never fully understood. He made in a month what Maya struggled to earn in a year, and he made it clear over time that her poverty was a choice she'd made by having a child too young with a man who'd left before Lily was born. Her younger sister Vanessa sat 3 rows back, scrolling through her phone with barely concealed boredom. Vanessa worked in marketing, lived in a studio apartment in Brooklyn that cost more than Maya's entire monthly income, and had perfected the art of being present without actually participating. She glanced up when Maya entered, offered a brief smile that didn't reach her eyes, and returned to her screen. The rest of the attendees were strangers. Co-workers from Uncle Raymond's 40 years at the Department of Records, Maya assumed. People who'd shared office space, but probably not much else. They had the look of civil servants who'd learned to mark time without complaint, their faces carrying the patient resignation of those who'd made peace with modest expectations. The service was brief and impersonal. A priest who'd clearly never met Uncle Raymond delivered remarks that could have applied to anyone. A good man, a faithful servant, gone to his reward. The coffin remained closed, which seemed appropriate for a man who'd lived his life with similar containment. No one cried. No one shared memories. The whole affair had the atmosphere of an obligation being fulfilled rather than a life being honored. Afterward, at the perfunctory reception in the chapel's basement, Marcus approached Maya, with Jennifer trailing behind like designer luggage. His expression carried the careful neutrality of someone about to deliver bad news while maintaining plausible deniability about his own responsibility for it. Maya, we need to talk about Uncle Raymond's apartment. She accepted a paper cup of weak coffee and waited. Marcus had a particular rhythm when he wanted something. Statement of fact, appeal to reason, assignment of responsibility that somehow always ended with Maya doing whatever he decided needed doing. He lived there for 40 years. Rent controlled. The landlord's been trying to empty the building for a decade. Now that Raymond's gone, they're not wasting time. We have 2 weeks to clear everything out. Maya's stomach dropped. 2 weeks. The family's splitting his savings, such as they were. About 15,000 total, 3 ways. $5,000 each. But someone needs to handle the physical stuff. The furniture, the personal effects, the paperwork. You know how he was about keeping everything. Jennifer's voice cut in, sharp and precise. We'd help, obviously, but Marcus has the Singapore trip. 2 weeks in Asia for the Hendricks account. Non-negotiable. Vanessa materialized with impeccable timing, as if she'd been waiting for her cue. And I just got promoted to senior associate. I'm drowning in client presentations. Like literally drowning. Maya looked between them, recognizing the choreography. This wasn't a conversation. It was an assignment already decided. I can't afford to take 2 weeks off work. I'm barely covering rent as it is. Marcus's expression shifted to something resembling sympathy, the kind that cost nothing to display. The 5,000 should help with that. And honestly, Maya, how much are you really making at those jobs? This is family responsibility. Raymond was our uncle who you visited exactly never. That's not fair, isn't it? The tension stretched between them. Jennifer checked her watch with theatrical precision. Vanessa found something fascinating on her phone. Marcus maintained his reasonable expression, the one that had served him well in boardrooms where emotional displays were tactical weaknesses. Look, someone has to do it. We're asking you because you have a time. I don't have time. I have 3 part-time jobs and a daughter with chronic medical needs. Then this is an opportunity. $5,000 for 2 weeks of work. That's not a bad hourly rate. Maya wanted to throw the weak coffee in his face. She wanted to list every time he'd offered opinions about her life while refusing actual help. She wanted to ask why success always came with a right to delegate difficulty to those with fewer options. Instead, she did what poverty had taught her to do. She swallowed her anger and calculated whether $5,000 was worth 2 weeks of unpaid work while her jobs found replacements for her shifts. Fine, I'll do it. Marcus's relief was immediate and shameless. Great. I'll text you the address and the landlord's contact info. The super has keys. Just coordinate with him. He walked away before she could change her mind, Jennifer following without a backward glance. Vanessa offered a brief shoulder squeeze that might have been meant as solidarity, but felt more like absolution, then disappeared toward the exit with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd mastered the art of non-involvement. Maya stood alone in the basement of a stranger's chapel, holding weak coffee and wondering how she'd been elected to clean out the life of a man she barely knew. Lily tugged her sleeve again, this time asking if they could go home now. The question carried more weight than a 6-year-old could understand. Home. The apartment they'd be evicted from in 30 days. Home. The concept that had become provisional, temporary, subject to cancellation based on factors beyond Maya's control. She took Lily's hand and headed for the bus stop. The $5,000 wouldn't solve anything fundamental. It would pay 1 month's rent and buy Lily's medications for 6 weeks, maybe 8 if she stretched. It would disappear into the same void that consumed every dollar she earned, leaving her exactly where she started but 2 weeks further behind on work she couldn't afford to miss. The following Monday, Maya stood outside Uncle Raymond's building in Queens. The structure dated from the 1970s, built during an era when affordable housing was still considered a reasonable municipal goal rather than a socialist fantasy. 6 stories of brown brick and narrow windows, a lobby that smelled like decades of cooking and industrial cleaning products. The kind of building that housed people who worked essential jobs without essential wages, who kept the city functioning while being priced out of every neighborhood that benefited from their labor. The super, a man named Dimitri who looked like he'd been hired during the building's construction and never left, handed her a key ring with theatrical reluctance. His accent was thick, Ukrainian or Russian, vowels flattened by decades of linguistic compromise. Apartment 4C. Raymond was good tenant, quiet, paid always on time, never complained, never caused problem, better than most. The implicit criticism of most people hung in the air. Dimitri had clearly spent 40 years managing a building full of humanity's minor failures and had developed opinions accordingly. How long do I have? 2 weeks, like landlord said. After that, dumpster comes. Whatever's left goes to trash. No exceptions. Building sells next month. Condos. You know how it is. Maya knew. Rent control protecting long-term tenants meant nothing when buildings changed hands. The new owners would gut the structure, triple the rent, and fill it with people who considered affordable housing a lifestyle choice rather than a survival necessity. The residents who'd lived there for decades would scatter to wherever people go when their city decides they're no longer economically viable. The elevator groaned its way to the 4th floor with mechanical reluctance. The hallway was narrow, painted institutional beige, lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed with electrical resentment. Apartment 4C sat at the end, its door unmarked except for the number and a series of locks that suggested Uncle Raymond had taken security seriously. Maya worked through the keys until she found the right combination. The door opened onto darkness and the particular smell of a space that had been closed for several days. Not rot or decay, but absence. The scent of air that hadn't circulated, of objects that had outlived their owner's need for them. She found the light switch. The apartment revealed itself in sections as illumination spread through connected rooms. It was smaller than she'd imagined. A living room that doubled as dining space, a narrow kitchen, a bedroom, a bathroom. Everything clean, organized, maintained with the discipline of someone who'd learned to live within precise boundaries and had never tested them. The furniture was old, but cared for. A sofa purchased in an era when durability mattered more than fashion. A dining table with 4 chairs, only one showing where from regular use. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes organized by subject and size. history, biography, technical manuals about filing systems, and municipal record-keeping. The reading habits of a man who'd spent his professional life categorizing other people's documentation and had apparently found the practice compelling enough to continue at home. But it was the filing cabinet that dominated the space. It stood against the far wall like a monument to systematic record-keeping. For drawers, industrial gray, metal construction that suggested it had been built during an era when office furniture was manufactured to outlast the workers who used it. The surface showed decades of minor wear, small dents and scratches that told stories of objects placed and removed, of daily interaction that left marks too subtle to notice individually, but which accumulated into visible history. Maya approached it slowly, feeling an irrational weight emanating from the object. It wasn't just large, it was present in a way that other furniture wasn't. It occupied space with intention, as if it had been placed there for a specific purpose and had never deviated from that purpose despite decades of opportunity. She tried the top drawer. Locked. The second drawer. Also locked. Third and fourth, same result. She checked the key ring Dmitri had given her, finding a smaller key that looked appropriate for cabinet locks. It fit the top drawer and turned with smooth precision. The drawer slid open with barely a whisper of resistance, its tracks well maintained despite age. Inside, files. Dozens of them, organized alphabetically with color-coded tabs. The labels were written in Uncle Raymond's precise handwriting, each letter formed with the careful attention of someone who believed documentation mattered. She pulled a file at random. Bank statements from 1987, arranged by month, each statement marked with neat notations in the margins. Deposits recorded, expenses tracked, balances calculated manually despite the bank having already done so. Redundancy as virtue. The second drawer held tax returns dating back to 1981, the year Uncle Raymond had started working for the city. Every form preserved, every receipt included, every calculation documented. She found pay stubs from jobs he'd held before municipal employment. A brief stint at a print shop, 6 months at a warehouse, 3 weeks at a restaurant that had apparently not worked out, given the handwritten note attached to the final check, not suited for customer interaction. The third drawer contained personal correspondence, letters from family members, most deceased, birthday cards saved decades past relevance. A postcard from Maya's father sent from Atlantic City in 1995, the message brief and forgettable, but preserved nonetheless. Uncle Raymond had kept everything, organized everything, creating an archive of a life that no one had been meant to see. The fourth drawer held something different. She felt the weight shift as she pulled it open, the drawer moving less smoothly despite the same well-maintained tracks. Inside, more files, but these were thicker, heavier. She lifted one. Medical records. Uncle Raymond's health history documented with the same precision as his finances. Every appointment noted, every prescription tracked, every diagnosis explained in handwritten summaries that suggested he'd researched each condition thoroughly. Beneath the medical files, she found something that stopped her completely. A thick folder labeled Maya, Chen, personal. Her name in her uncle's handwriting. The letters formed with the same careful attention he'd given to everything else. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside, newspaper clippings about her high school graduation. A copy of her college acceptance letter, though she'd never told Uncle Raymond she'd been accepted and had ultimately declined due to financial constraints. Articles about the company where she'd worked before Lily was born, a promising position she'd left when pregnancy made clear that childcare would cost more than her salary could cover. There were printouts from social media posts she'd made years ago, happy moments documented and saved by someone who'd been watching from a distance. Photos of Lily as a baby, copied from Facebook albums Maya had forgotten existed. Recent articles about managing childhood asthma, printed and highlighted, with handwritten notes in the margins suggesting research into treatment options and financial assistance programs. Uncle Raymond had been following her life with detailed attention while never once indicating that he cared. The contradiction was staggering. This man who'd sat silently at family gatherings, who'd never called or visited, who'd existed as furniture in the background of family events. He'd been documenting her struggles with the same precision he applied to his tax returns. She found a letter dated 2 months ago, addressed to her but never sent. The handwriting was shakier than on other documents, suggesting illness or age had begun to compromise his legendary precision. Dear Maya, I know you won't remember me well. I was never good at family the way your father was. Words didn't come easily, and by the time I realized that silence was its own kind of failure, too much time had passed to bridge the gap without feeling foolish. But I watched you grow up from a distance. I saw you make good choices with bad options. I saw you become the kind of mother I wish I'd had courage to tell you I admired. The filing cabinet contains documentation of your struggle. I kept records because I didn't know how else to show I cared. Perhaps that makes me pathetic. Perhaps it makes me creepy. But it's what I knew how to do. Inside this cabinet is also something else. I can't tell you directly because I'm not brave enough to face your questions about why I waited so long. But if you're reading this after I'm gone, please know that everything I saved was meant to help when the time came. I'm sorry I couldn't help while I was alive. I'm sorry I didn't know how to be family in a way that mattered. I'm sorry for all the silence. But I'm not sorry I kept watching. You deserve to be seen, even if I didn't know how to show you I was looking. Uncle Raymond. Maya's vision blurred with tears she hadn't expected. This stranger whose family had been documenting her life while she'd been too busy surviving to notice. The filing cabinet wasn't just record-keeping. It was evidence that someone had been paying attention while she'd felt invisible. Her phone rang. Marcus, his voice carrying the impatient efficiency of someone calling from an airport lounge. Hey, quick question. Have you started clearing the apartment yet? She wiped her eyes, steadying her voice. I'm here now. Great. Look, I know we said 2 weeks, but the landlord's pushing. They want it done in 10 days. Can you make that work? Marcus, that's not what we agreed to. I know, but they're threatening to charge storage fees if we go past the deadline. Just throw out whatever doesn't have obvious value. Old furniture, paperwork, that kind of thing. There's a filing cabinet, right? Raymond was obsessed with keeping every scrap of paper. Just dump it. No one needs 40 years of utility bills. Maya's grip tightened on her phone. The filing cabinet has personal things. Files about family. So pull out anything that seems important and trash the rest. Seriously, Maya, don't make this complicated. It's just a filing cabinet. Not like there's anything valuable in there. Raymond lived like a monk. The most excitement in that apartment is probably expired coupons organized by date. Vanessa's voice echoed in the background. She must have been at the airport too, probably headed somewhere that required business casual and carry-on luggage. Just throw it away, Maya. We don't have space to store it, and no one wants to keep Dad's weird brother's paranoid paperwork collection. Marcus came back on the line. Look, I have to board. Just use your judgment. $5,000 for 10 days now. That's even better hourly. We trust you to handle this. Don't overthink it. He disconnected before she could respond. Maya stood in Uncle Raymond's apartment, surrounded by 40 years of carefully documented life, holding a letter from a man who'd cared from a distance because he didn't know how to care up close. The filing cabinet loomed against the wall, heavy with meaning her siblings were ready to dump without examination. She thought about the eviction notice waiting in her own apartment, about Lily's medications that would run out in 3 weeks, about the mathematics of poverty that never allowed enough margin to refuse work, even work that came wrapped in dismissal and assumption. She could throw the cabinet away, follow Marcus's instructions, collect the $5,000, return to her 3 part-time jobs, and hope she could keep enough shifts to avoid immediate disaster. It would be easier. It would be simpler. It would be one less problem in a life already overflowing with problems. But Uncle Raymond had kept these files for a reason. He'd preserved documentation about her life with the same care he'd given to his own. And that letter, that shakily written letter, had mentioned something else. Inside this cabinet is also something else. Not just records. Something else. She looked at the filing cabinet with fresh attention. For drawers, all accessible now that she had the key. But there had been weight in that 4th drawer, an irregularity in how it moved despite well-maintained tracks. She opened it again, removing the medical files and the thick folder about her life. The drawer was deep, deeper than the others. She measured the depth externally, then internally. There was a discrepancy. Several inches of space unaccounted for. She knocked on the back panel of the drawer. The sound was wrong, not quite hollow, but not quite solid either. Muffled. She ran her fingers along the edges, looking for seams or catches. Nothing obvious presented itself, but the weight was undeniable. Something existed in that space that wasn't immediately visible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Kowalski. "Lily okay with me tonight, if you need to work late. She is eating dinner now. Good girl, your daughter. You take your time." Maya sent a quick thank you and turned back to the filing cabinet. The apartment was quiet, insulated from street noise by decades of accumulated habitation. She could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the tick of a wall clock in the bedroom, her own breathing as she studied the drawer's construction. Uncle Raymond had been a municipal clerk who'd filed paperwork for 40 years. If anyone knew how to create a hidden compartment in a filing cabinet, it would be someone who understood filing systems intimately. The question was whether he'd done it himself or had it professionally modified. She pulled the drawer out completely, setting it on the floor. The cabinet's interior was now exposed, the metal frame revealing decades of accumulated dust. She used her phone's flashlight to examine the space where the drawer had been, and there, barely visible against the gray metal, she saw a small indentation. Not a defect, but a deliberate feature. A button recessed into the frame, positioned where it would be impossible to access with the drawer in place. Her heart rate increased despite her attempt to remain calm. This was either elaborate security for worthless documents, or Uncle Raymond had hidden something significant enough to require protection. Given his 40-year career filing other people's paperwork, the odds of him having something valuable seemed low. But the odds of him going to this much trouble for no reason seemed even lower. She pressed the button. Nothing happened. She pressed harder, wondering if years had frozen the mechanism. Still nothing. Then she noticed a small keyhole beneath the button, barely larger than a pinhole. She examined the key Ring Dimitri had given her. Most keys were standard issue, but one was tiny, delicate, the kind that might fit a jewelry box or a diary. She inserted it. The key turned with a soft click that sounded disproportionately loud in the quiet apartment. Somewhere inside the cabinet, something mechanical engaged. She heard a faint whir, then silence. Nothing visible had changed. She lifted the bottom drawer out entirely, setting it beside its partner on the floor. The cabinet's base was now exposed. At first glance, it appeared solid. Metal construction, no obvious seams. But when she tapped it lightly, the sound was definitively hollow. She pressed various points, testing for give. Nothing moved. Then she remembered Uncle Raymond's filing methodology. Everything organized, everything systematic, everything with a logic that would make sense only to someone who'd spent 40 years thinking about optimal documentation systems. She looked at the front panel of the cabinet where the manufacturer's information had been stamped. Wellington Office Systems, 1978. Model 4D Security Series. She pulled out her phone and searched Wellington Filing Cabinet Hidden Compartment. The results were sparse, mostly forum discussions about antique office furniture. But one thread caught her attention. A post from 2015, someone asking about Wellington Security Series cabinets and their vault feature. The responses were skeptical, suggesting it was an urban legend. But one commenter had included a scan from an old Wellington catalog. The 4D Security Series had indeed included an optional vault feature, a hidden compartment in the base accessed through a combination of key and pressure points. The catalog page described the mechanism. For important documents requiring additional security, the 4DS includes a reinforced vault compartment accessed via sequential release system. Drawer removal required for access. Key turns engage magnetic locks. Sequential pressure on base plate corners releases floor panel. Maya's hands shook slightly as she returned to the cabinet. Sequential pressure on base plate corners. She pressed the front left corner of the exposed base. A barely audible click. Front right corner. Another click. Rear right corner. Click. Rear left corner. The final click was followed by a longer mechanical sound, like gears engaging after decades of stillness. The base panel lifted slightly, just enough to create a narrow gap around its edges. She worked her fingers under the edge and lifted. The panel came up smoothly, revealing a space beneath. Not large, perhaps 8 inches deep, but the entire width and depth of the cabinet's base. And inside, illuminated by her phone's flashlight, was a vault door. Small, circular, with a combination lock. Beside it, an envelope taped to the metal, her name written on the outside in Uncle Raymond's handwriting. Maya lifted the envelope carefully. The tape was recent, applied within the last few months based on its condition. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a business card. The letter was brief. Maya, if you found this, it means you didn't throw away the cabinet like I suspect your brother will tell you to. I knew you wouldn't, not without looking first. You've always been more patient than circumstances gave you credit for. The combination is your birthday and Lily's birthday. Day, month, year for each. No spaces. I watched you struggle for 6 years while your siblings pretended poverty was a choice you made rather than a trap built by systems they benefited from. I couldn't help directly. Words never came easily, and by the time I understood that some help requires speaking, I was too old and too frightened to bridge the distance. So I did what I knew how to do. I saved. I invested. I documented. The vault contains bearer bonds, gold certificates, and documentation for offshore accounts established before such things became impossible. Total value approximately $312 million. The business card belongs to Arthur Brennan, my attorney. He's been paid through a trust to handle the legal complexities of what I'm leaving you. He's expecting your call. He'll guide you through the process of legitimizing everything. I know this will change your life. I hope it changes it for the better. I hope you don't become like Marcus, for whom wealth became permission to stop seeing other people's pain. I hope you remember what it felt like to count dollars while your daughter struggled to breathe. I hope you use this to build the life you deserve rather than the life you were forced to accept. I'm sorry I couldn't say this while I was alive. I'm sorry for all the silence. But I'm not sorry for watching, and I'm not sorry for saving. You were never invisible to me, Maya. You were the only one I could always see. Uncle Raymond. Maya's hands shook violently now, the letter rustling with involuntary movement. $312 million. The number was incomprehensible. It belonged to a different universe where problems could be solved rather than endured. She read the letter again, then a third time, waiting for the punchline, the qualification, the reveal that she'd misunderstood something fundamental. But the vault door was real. The combination lock was real. Her birthday was February 14th, 1992. Lily's birthday was August 3rd, 2018. She tried the combination with trembling fingers. 140-21992 pause. 030822018. The lock resisted at first, decades of stillness making the mechanism reluctant. Then it engaged. The tumblers fell into alignment with a series of soft clicks. The vault door opened smoothly, as if recently oiled despite years of being sealed. Inside, exactly as the letter promised, bearer bonds and protective sleeves. Gold certificates with official seals and dates spanning 3 decades. A leather portfolio containing documents in plastic sleeves, each page marked with notations explaining accounts, access codes, legal structures. Everything organized with the same meticulous precision Uncle Raymond had applied to his utility bills and tax returns. And beneath everything, a small velvet bag that chinked softly when she lifted it. Gold coins, she realized. Physical gold, stored in the base of a filing cabinet in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens. She sat on the floor of her dead uncle's apartment, surrounded by 40 years of systematic documentation, staring into a vault that contained more money than she could conceptually process. Her phone buzzed with a text from her manager at the coffee shop asking if she could cover a shift tomorrow morning. The juxtaposition was so absurd she started laughing, then couldn't stop, the sound edging toward hysteria before she forced herself to breathe deeply and regain control. Lily had medications that cost $400 per month. Rent was $1,800 for an apartment she'd be evicted from in 30 days. Her total savings were $217. The gap between her reality and the contents of this vault was so vast, it felt like discovering she'd been living in a different dimension. Her phone rang. Marcus, again, his voice carrying the particular impatience of someone calling from a different time zone. Hey, quick update. Jennifer found a company that does estate cleanouts. They can have the apartment empty in 2 days. Charge $1,500, but we can split it 3 ways. That's only $500 each, and it saves you the hassle. Sound good? Maya looked at the vault door, at the bearer bonds worth millions, at the letter from a man who'd cared silently while her siblings had performed concern without substance. She thought about Uncle Raymond filing paperwork for 40 years while saving and investing with mathematical precision. She thought about him keeping detailed records of her struggle while never once offering the help he'd been accumulating. The anger surprised her with its intensity. Why wait? Why watch her count dollars and ration medications and move apartments 4 times in 2 years while he sat on enough money to solve everything permanently? Why document her pain instead of alleviating it? But beneath the anger was understanding. Uncle Raymond hadn't known how to be family the way other people were. He'd been a clerk, a filer, a documenter. He'd expressed love through preservation rather than intervention. And he'd built this inheritance not as a gift from a generous relative, but as restitution from a man who recognized he'd failed at connection while succeeding at accumulation. Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts. Maya, you still there? Should I tell them to schedule the clean out? She made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. No, I'll handle it myself. As agreed. Maya, don't be stubborn about this. The $1,500 isn't a big deal, and it frees you up to get back to work. I'm keeping the filing cabinet. Silence on the line, then Marcus's laugh. You're kidding. That thing weighs like 200 pounds. Where are you going to put it? You're about to be evicted. I'll figure it out. Maya, be reasonable. It's junk, old paperwork, and probably rats nesting in the drawers. There's a dumpster outside. Put the cabinet in it and let the professionals handle the rest of the stuff. I said I'm keeping it. His voice sharpened with irritation. This is why you can't get ahead. You make things complicated when they should be simple. Just throw it away. No one wants a dead man's filing cabinet. I want it. Then you're being sentimental about junk while your daughter suffers because you can't make practical decisions. The words landed with precision. Marcus had probably calibrated based on past arguments. He knew exactly which vulnerabilities to target when Maya resisted his instructions. But this time, the words bounced off something harder than usual. She was sitting on the floor of an apartment her siblings wanted emptied, staring at $312 million in a vault they'd told her to throw in a dumpster. The irony was too perfect to generate anger. It generated clarity. I'm keeping the cabinet, Marcus, and I'm keeping Uncle Raymond's files. I'll have the apartment cleared in 10 days, as requested. But the cabinet comes with me. You're being ridiculous. Fine, keep the garbage. But when you can't fit it anywhere and it ends up on the curb anyway, don't come crying about how you wasted time and energy on worthless junk. He disconnected before she could respond. Maya sat in the silence that followed, listening to the refrigerator hum and the wall clock tick. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Marcus says you're keeping the filing cabinet? Girl, no. It's gross. Just take a picture if you're feeling sentimental and throw it out. She didn't respond. Instead, she carefully closed the vault door, replaced the base panel, and slid the drawers back into position. The cabinet appeared exactly as it had when she'd first entered the apartment. Just another piece of old furniture waiting to be discarded by people who couldn't be bothered to look deeper. She pulled out the business card Arthur Brennan had left. Law offices in Manhattan, a Fifth Avenue address that suggested competence backed by expense. She called the number, expecting voicemail at 7 o'clock on a Monday evening. Instead, a receptionist answered immediately. Brennan and Associates. How may I help you? My name is Maya Chen. I'm calling about Raymond Chen's estate. Arthur Brennan asked me to contact him. One moment, please. The hold music was classical, expensive sounding. Then a voice, male, older, carrying the particular confidence of someone who'd spent decades navigating complicated situations. Ms. Chen, I've been expecting your call. Raymond was quite specific about timing. I assume you found the vault. Yes. And you understand what it contains. He said $312 million. But that can't be accurate. It's conservative. Bearer bonds appreciate. Current market value is closer to $340 million, though exact figures depend on liquidation timing. Maya's vision tunneled. The apartment reduced to a narrow point of focus. Her phone pressed hard against her ear. Arthur Brennan's voice cutting through decades of poverty like a knife through wet paper. Ms. Chen, I know this is overwhelming. Raymond prepared for this moment. I need you to do exactly as I tell you for the next 72 hours. First, don't tell anyone about the vault. Not family, not friends. No one. Second, don't remove anything from the cabinet yet. Leave it sealed until we can arrange proper security. Third, can you keep the apartment accessible for 3 more days? I don't know. The landlord wants it empty. I'll handle the landlord. Raymond established a contingency fund for exactly this kind of situation. You focus on the following. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., come to my office. Alone. Bring Raymond's letter and any documentation from a vault. We'll begin the legal process of transferring everything to your name. This will be complicated, but it's manageable if we proceed carefully. How long have you known about this? Raymond retained me 6 years ago, shortly after your daughter was born. He'd been accumulating assets for 20 years before that, but her birth motivated him to create a formal structure. He wanted to ensure that when the time came, you'd have not just money, but protection from the complications money creates. Why didn't he just give it to me while he was alive? Arthur Brennan's pause carried weight. He was afraid you'd refuse it, afraid you'd see it as pity rather than restitution. He was also aware that sudden wealth, especially wealth given directly, creates tax burdens that would have consumed significant portions. The bearer bonds, the offshore structures, these were established when such things were legal, but difficult. They've matured over decades. What he's leaving you is not taxable in the traditional sense. It's essentially invisible wealth that becomes visible only when you choose to access it. He spent 20 years creating a fortress for you, Ms. Chen. Now I need to teach you how to live in it safely. Maya closed her eyes, processing implications that multiplied faster than she could track them. My family wants me to throw away the cabinet. They want the apartment cleared in a week. Then we move quickly. But remember, until the transfer is complete and the legal structures are in place, you are not wealthy. You're a woman cleaning out your uncle's apartment who happens to have found something interesting. Act accordingly. Be boring. Be unremarkable. Let your family think you're being sentimental about junk. The best protection for money is being invisible until invisibility is no longer necessary. They talked for another 20 minutes, Arthur Brennan outlining steps with practiced efficiency. Temporary storage for the cabinet at a secure facility he'd arrange. Documentation she'd need to bring tomorrow. People who would be present at the meeting, tax specialists, security consultants, a probate attorney. When the call ended, Maya sat on Uncle Raymond's floor for a long time, watching light fade from the windows. Her life had divided into before and after, the line drawn in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens. Before, she'd been a woman drowning in small disasters. After, she was something else entirely, though what that something was remained unclear. She thought about calling Lily, but what would she say? Everything's different now. Your medications are no longer an impossible expense. We'll never worry about rent again. The words felt unreal, science fiction. Better to wait until morning, until Arthur Brennan's office, until the legal machinery turned this discovery into reality rather than hallucination. She locked the apartment carefully, double-checking each lock Uncle Raymond had installed. The filing cabinet stood against its wall, indistinguishable from any other old furniture awaiting disposal. She touched its cool metal surface briefly, a gesture that might have been gratitude or apology or both. The bus ride home took 90 minutes. Maya watched the city pass in reverse, expensive neighborhoods giving way to cheaper ones, the geography of wealth rendered visible through architecture and street lighting. She'd made this journey thousands of times, always aware of her position in the hierarchy, always conscious of being someone who cleaned buildings she could never afford to enter. Tomorrow, Arthur Brennan would explain how to access $340 million without triggering scrutiny or taxation. Tomorrow, the mathematics of poverty would be replaced by mathematics of wealth. But tonight, she was still the same woman who'd started the day. Still facing eviction. Still rationing medication. Still counting dollars while the world insisted her struggle was a choice rather than a design. The only difference was knowledge. Knowledge that Uncle Raymond had been watching. Knowledge that he'd saved. Knowledge that 40 years of quiet accumulation had been building toward this specific moment when his death would transfer everything to the niece he'd never known how to talk to. She entered her apartment to find Lily asleep on the couch, Mrs. Kowalski dozing in the chair beside her with the television playing softly. The elderly woman woke when Maya entered, blinking herself back to awareness with practiced speed. Long day. Very long. The little one was good. Always good, your Lily. Ate dinner, did homework, no complaints. Maya paid Mrs. Kowalski the $20 they'd agreed on, knowing the woman didn't need the money, but accepted it to avoid making Maya feel indebted. The gesture was another form of preservation, maintaining dignity when circumstances tried to strip it away. After Mrs. Kowalski left, Maya carried Lily to bed without waking her. She tucked her daughter in and stood watching her sleep, thinking about medications that would never run out, about apartments they'd never be evicted from, about futures that could include college and opportunities rather than compromises and catastrophes. Uncle Raymond had watched from a distance while Maya had felt invisible. He'd documented her struggle while she'd wondered if anyone noticed she was drowning. He'd saved methodically, precisely, with the same attention he'd given to 40 years of utility bills and tax returns. And now his silence had become the loudest thing in her life, echoing through a vault she'd been told to throw away. She fell asleep wondering what tomorrow would bring, knowing that whatever came next, it would arrive in an office on Fifth Avenue with lawyers and documents and mechanisms for making invisible wealth visible. The filing cabinet would remain in Queens for 3 more days while security was arranged. Her family would continue believing she was being foolishly sentimental about worthless junk. And Uncle Raymond's final gift would sit waiting, protected by locks and ignorance, until Maya was ready to accept that sometimes salvation comes from the people who never learned to offer it directly. The morning arrived with the same indifference mornings always had. Alarm at 6, Lily stirring in her bed, the apartment's familiar sounds resuming their daily pattern. Coffee maker gurgling, radiator clanking, the upstairs neighbor's heavy footsteps tracking across ceiling. Maya moved through her routine on autopilot, making breakfast, packing Lily's inhaler, preparing for a day that should have been ordinary except for the knowledge sitting in her chest like swallowed glass. $340 million. The number refused to behave like other numbers. It wouldn't stay in her mind properly, kept sliding away whenever she tried to grasp its implications. Last night, she'd found a vault in her dead uncle's filing cabinet. This morning, she still had $17 in her checking account and an eviction notice counting down to 0. She dropped Lily at school, hugging her daughter longer than usual. The girl squirmed with mild embarrassment, aware that other kids were watching. Maya released her reluctantly, watching Lily join the cluster of children flowing toward the entrance. 6 years old and already learning that visible need made you a target. Already developing the armor poverty required, the careful neutrality that prevented others from seeing what you lacked. The subway to Manhattan took 40 minutes. Maya watched the car fill and empty at each stop, the morning commute sorting people by destination and purpose. Professionals heading to offices where they made decisions. Service workers heading to clean those offices after the decision-makers left. The city's economy rendered visible through who stood and who sat, who wore suits and who wore uniforms. Brennan and Associates occupied the 32nd floor of a building on Fifth Avenue, where the lobby alone probably cost more than Maya had earned in her entire life. Marble floors, security desk staffed by people whose job was to look friendly while preventing the wrong kind of person from reaching the elevators. She gave her name, was verified against a list, and received a visitor badge that felt like a passport to a country she'd never been invited to enter. The elevator was fast enough to make her ears pop. The 32nd floor opened onto reception that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed furniture could be art if it cost enough. A woman at the desk smiled with professional warmth that didn't quite reach her eyes and gestured toward leather chairs that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Arthur Brennan emerged within minutes. Mid-60s, silver hair, expensive suit worn with the comfort of someone who owned many identical versions. He extended his hand with practiced warmth. "Ms. Chen, thank you for being punctual. Raymond would have appreciated that." His office overlooked the city from a height that made buildings look like models. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk that could have seated 8 people for dinner, bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that suggested either extensive reading or expensive decoration. 3 other people waited inside, introduced with titles that meant nothing to Maya but apparently carried weight. Tax specialist, estate attorney, security consultant. Arthur gestured for her to sit in a chair positioned to face the assembled expertise. "Before we begin, I need to explain something about Raymond's situation. What he's leaving you is both simple and extraordinarily complex. Simple because it's already yours legally. Complex because accessing it requires navigating systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of transfer." The tax specialist, a woman named Judith Chen, no relation, leaned forward. She had the particular intensity of someone who'd built a career understanding rules most people didn't know existed. "Your uncle spent 26 years establishing financial structures that were legal when created, but have since become nearly impossible to replicate. Bearer bonds purchased before 1982 when they were discontinued. Gold certificates from an era when private gold ownership faced different regulations. Offshore accounts established through channels that no longer exist." The estate attorney, Robert Walsh, picked up the thread. He did this gradually, methodically, never attracting attention from the IRS or financial regulators. Small purchases over decades, documented meticulously, but held in structures that don't report to traditional oversight mechanisms. The result is wealth that exists in a kind of legal shadow. Not illegal, but not visible through normal channels. Maya's head spun. "I don't understand. If it's legal, why is it complicated?" Arthur's expression suggested he'd expected this question. "It's legal for you to inherit. But the moment you try to convert bearer bonds to cash, or transfer offshore accounts to domestic banks, or sell gold certificates, you trigger reporting requirements. Suddenly, agencies want to know where this wealth came from, how it was accumulated, whether taxes were properly paid. The scrutiny itself can freeze assets for years while investigations proceed." The security consultant, a man named Thomas Gray who looked like he'd spent a previous career in law enforcement, spoke for the first time. "There's also the personal risk. Sudden wealth makes you a target. Family members who didn't know you had money suddenly need it. Financial predators circle. Even well-meaning friends become complicated when they know you could solve their problems with a fraction of what you have." Maya thought about Marcus and Vanessa, about their immediate assumption that the filing cabinet was junk, about their dismissal of anything that didn't fit their preconceptions. "My family doesn't know about the vault, and they shouldn't," Thomas said bluntly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's your decision, but make it carefully. Wealth changes relationships. Usually not for the better." Arthur pulled out a thick folder, its contents organized with precision that would have made Uncle Raymond proud. Raymond understood all of this. That's why he spent the last 6 years preparing for this transfer. He established trusts, created paper trails that satisfy legal requirements while maintaining privacy, built structures that allow you to access wealth gradually without triggering the kind of attention that invites problems. He slid the first document across the desk. "This is the primary trust. Raymond Chen established it in 2018, naming you as sole beneficiary. The trust owns the bearer bonds, the gold certificates, the offshore accounts. Upon his death, which we're here to officially certify, everything transfers to you automatically. No probate, no public record, no announcement." Maya stared at the document. Her name appeared multiple times, typed in legal language that transformed her into a person capable of receiving $340 million. What happens next? Judith leaned forward again. Gradually, we convert invisible wealth into accessible wealth. Bearer bonds get sold through intermediaries who specialize in these transactions. Proceeds go into the trust, which then distributes to you in structured payments that appear as income from legitimate sources. Offshore accounts get transferred to domestic trusts, then distributed similarly. Gold certificates get redeemed through dealers who handle documentation. The whole process takes approximately 2 years. 2 years. To do it safely, yes. We could accelerate, but acceleration increases risk. IRS audits, financial investigations, problems that could freeze everything while they're resolved. Raymond's plan was designed to be slow and invisible. Boring. The kind of financial activity that doesn't attract attention because it looks like ordinary trust management. Robert added context. During those 2 years, you'll receive monthly distributions from the trust. Starting amount, $50,000 per month. Tax paid by the trust, so that's net to you. After 6 months, if everything proceeds smoothly, we increase to $100,000 per month. After a year, $200,000. By the time the full transfer is complete, you'll have received approximately $3 million in distributions, and the remaining balance will be fully accessible through structures that appear completely legitimate. Maya's mind refused to process the numbers. $50,000 per month was more than she'd earned in the past year combined. What if I need money before then? Emergencies? The trust includes emergency provisions, Arthur said. Medical expenses, housing costs, immediate needs. We can authorize distributions outside the normal schedule. But Maya, this is important. For the next 60 days, you need to behave as if nothing has changed. Keep your jobs, maintain your routine. Don't make large purchases or sudden lifestyle changes. The best cover for new wealth is continuing to look like you don't have any. Thomas interrupted, which brings us to immediate security concerns. The filing cabinet needs to be moved from your uncle's apartment to secure storage. We've arranged for a specialty moving company, bonded and insured, who handles sensitive materials. They'll collect the cabinet tomorrow morning at 9. You should be present but not involved. Let them do their work. My family thinks I'm clearing the apartment myself. If a professional moving company shows up for one filing cabinet, they'll ask questions. Then don't tell them the company is coming. Be there alone. Your family has already dismissed the cabinet as worthless. They won't check on whether it's been discarded or stored. Arthur's voice carried an edge of judgment when he mentioned her family. Raymond was quite clear about your siblings' probable reactions. He witnessed enough family dynamics to predict how this would unfold. Maya felt defensive despite knowing Arthur was right. They're not bad people. They're just busy. They told you to throw away $340 million without looking at it. I'll let you decide what that says about their judgment. The meeting continued for another 90 minutes. Documents to sign, procedures to memorize, contact numbers for different situations. Arthur explained that he'd been retained through a separate trust funded by Uncle Raymond specifically to manage this transition. His firm would be her primary point of contact for the next 2 years, available 24 hours for complications. Judith walked her through tax implications, explaining how the trust structures meant Maya would receive wealth without the usual tax burden that would consume 40% in a traditional inheritance. Raymond paid taxes on everything when he earned it initially. What he saved and invested was already post-tax income. The structures he built just preserve that status while transferring ownership. It's completely legal, just increasingly rare in modern financial systems. Robert discussed practical matters. She'd need a new bank account separate from her current one, where trust distributions would be deposited. Nothing fancy, just a regular checking account at a major bank. The first distribution would arrive in 7 days, once Raymond's death certificate was filed and the trust activated. Until then, she was exactly who she'd been yesterday, a woman struggling to pay rent. When the meeting finally ended, Maya felt like she'd attended a graduate seminar in a subject she didn't know existed. Arthur walked her to the elevator, his manner shifting slightly from professional to personal. "Raymond talked about you often in our meetings. He was proud of how you'd kept your daughter safe despite impossible circumstances. He was also ashamed he'd waited so long to help. This inheritance isn't charity, Maya. It's restitution from a man who finally figured out how to say he cared." The elevator descended 32 floors. Maya emerged into the marble lobby, feeling disconnected from her body, as if she'd left part of herself in Arthur's office and retrieved a replica that looked similar but functioned differently. She checked her phone. Messages from Marcus, Vanessa, her manager at the coffee shop asking if she could cover an afternoon shift. The ordinary demands of her ordinary life, still present, still requiring attention, despite the fact that everything fundamental had changed. She took the subway back to Queens. Uncle Raymond's apartment waited, its locks unchanged, its contents undisturbed. She promised to clear everything in 10 days. The furniture would go to donation centers, the books to libraries, the personal papers to storage or disposal, depending on content. Everything except the filing cabinet, which would disappear tomorrow morning into secure storage while her family assumed it had been dumped. The deception bothered her more than she'd expected. Not because Marcus and Vanessa deserved honesty, but because hiding felt like confirmation that Thomas was right. Wealth changed relationships. It created barriers where familiarity had existed. She was already calculating who could be trusted with knowledge and who couldn't. Already sorting people into categories based on how they might react to discovering she had money. Her phone rang. Marcus, his voice carrying irritation before he'd even finished his greeting. "Maya, I just got off the phone with Dimitri, the super. He says you haven't started clearing the apartment yet. We have 10 days. You need to actually work instead of sitting around being nostalgic. I was there yesterday. I'm going back this afternoon." Going back isn't the same as clearing out. You need to be throwing things away, not examining every piece of paper like it's a historical document. "And please tell me you've reconsidered about the filing cabinet." "I'm keeping it." His sigh carried the weight of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. "Where are you going to put it? You're about to be evicted. You're going to move that 200-pound cabinet to where exactly? Your next apartment that you haven't found yet and can't afford." "I'll figure it out. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You make emotional decisions instead of practical ones, then wonder why you can't get ahead. That cabinet has no value. Zero. It's taking up space in an apartment that needs to be empty so we could get our $5,000 each. Just throw it away." Maya felt the familiar pattern of their arguments. Marcus presenting his logic as universal truth, framing her choices as failures of judgment, positioning himself as the reasonable one trying to help despite her stubbornness. Usually, she'd eventually concede, too tired to fight, too aware of her precarious position to risk alienating family when she might need them later. This time, she had $340 million worth of reasons to stand firm. "The cabinet is mine. It was Uncle Raymond's most personal possession. I'm keeping it. You're being ridiculous about junk. Then it's my ridiculous decision to make. Fine, keep your junk, but don't come to me when you can't afford to move it or store it. Don't call asking for money when that cabinet is sitting in storage costing you $100 a month while Lily needs medication you can't afford." He hung up before she could respond. Maya stared at her phone, anger and amusement mixing in equal parts. Marcus lecturing her about storage costs when she'd soon have $50,000 arriving monthly. The irony was almost beautiful. Vanessa texted minutes later. "Marcus says you're being weird about the cabinet. What's going on? Is this like a grief thing? Because there are healthier ways to process loss than hoarding furniture." Maya didn't respond. She returned to Uncle Raymond's apartment, where the filing cabinet stood against its wall, indistinguishable from any other piece of old furniture except for what it contained. She opened the vault again, needing to confirm last night hadn't been hallucination. The bearer bonds were real. The gold certificates real. The documentation real. Uncle Raymond's careful accumulation of 26 years, all real. She pulled out her phone and photographed several of the bearer bonds, making sure the denominations were visible. Then she called Arthur Brennan. "I need to know this is actually happening, that I'm not misunderstanding something fundamental." His voice carried patient understanding. "You're not misunderstanding. I know it feels impossible. Raymond spent decades building something that by all logical standards shouldn't exist. But it does. In 7 days, you'll receive the first distribution. $50,000 will appear in your new account. That's when it starts feeling real. What if something goes wrong? What if the IRS decides this looks suspicious?" Then we show them the documentation Raymond prepared. 26 years of legitimate purchases, savings, investments. Every dollar accounted for. Every transaction legal at the time it occurred. The complexity is meant to discourage scrutiny, not hide illegality. Raymond paid more taxes over his lifetime than most people earn. He has nothing to hide except the fact that he was better at saving than anyone expected. They talked for another 20 minutes. Arthur explaining again how the trust worked, how distributions would flow, what to do if anyone started asking uncomfortable questions. His reassurance helped marginally, but Maya still felt like she was standing on ice that might crack at any moment, plunging her back into the poverty she'd temporarily escaped. She spent the afternoon sorting Uncle Raymond's belongings with new attention. The books revealed a man who'd read extensively about financial systems, investment strategies, wealth preservation. Titles like Bearer Bonds, History and Practice, and Offshore Asset Protection sat alongside novels and biographies. His medicine cabinet contained vitamins and generic medications. Nothing expensive, nothing unnecessary. His refrigerator held basics purchased in modest quantities. Every aspect of his life demonstrated the same principle: minimize current spending, maximize future accumulation. She found a shoebox in his bedroom closet filled with additional photographs. Uncle Raymond at various ages, always alone or on the periphery of family groups. Several showed him at work, sitting at a desk surrounded by filing cabinets, his expression focused and content. He'd found purpose in organization, in creating systems that made sense when human relationships didn't. Among the photos was one that stopped her completely. Uncle Raymond standing in front of a building she recognized, the hospital where Lily had been born. The date on the back read August 2018. He'd been there. The day Lily was born, or close to it, Uncle Raymond had traveled to that hospital and stood outside, close enough to bear witness, too afraid or too proud to come inside. The discovery broke something in Maya's chest. 6 years of feeling alone while raising Lily, 6 years of wondering if anyone noticed she was struggling, and Uncle Raymond had been there, watching from distances he couldn't close, documenting moments he couldn't join. His love had been real, just expressed in a language Maya hadn't known to look for. She sat on his bed, holding the photograph and crying in a way she hadn't allowed herself to cry in years. Not from sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming weight of being seen by someone she'd assumed hadn't noticed her existence. Uncle Raymond had seen everything. He just lacked the vocabulary to tell her so. Her phone rang. Mrs. Kowalski, her elderly neighbor, voice apologetic. "Maya, I'm sorry to bother. Lily's school called. She had episode with breathing. Nothing serious, they say, but she's in nurse's office. They cannot reach you, so they called emergency contact." Maya's stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "Nurse says yes, but you should come. Lily is scared." She left Uncle Raymond's apartment immediately, barely remembering to lock the door. The subway crawled through stops that seemed designed to maximize anxiety. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from the school, all while she'd been in Uncle Raymond's apartment with her phone on silent. Mother of the Year, letting her daughter have an asthma attack while sorting through a dead man's belongings. Lily sat in the nurse's office looking small and frightened, her inhaler on the desk beside her. The nurse explained with professional calm that Lily had been running during recess when her breathing became labored. Nothing emergency room serious, but enough to require sitting out the rest of the day. Maya should consider talking to Lily's doctor about adjusting her medication. The doctor she saw every 3 months, the one whose visits cost $200 even with Maya's minimal insurance. The one who'd already suggested better medications that cost 3 times what the current prescriptions did. The one who'd expressed gentle concern about how many emergency room visits Lily had needed over the past year, the subtext being that better preventive care would reduce crisis interventions. Maya signed Lily out of school early and took her home. Her daughter was quiet on the subway, not asking questions, just pressing close to Maya's side with the trust children show before the world teaches them that adults don't always fix things. Back at their apartment, Maya settled Lily on the couch with a movie while she stood in the kitchen, staring at collection notices pinned to the refrigerator with cheap magnets. In 7 days, $50,000 would arrive. In 7 days, she could take Lily to the doctor without calculating whether the visit would mean no groceries for a week. In 7 days, everything would change. But today was not 7 days from now. Today, she still had $17 in checking and a daughter who needed medications she couldn't afford optimal versions of. Her phone buzzed. Text from the coffee shop manager. Hey, we need to talk about your schedule. You called out twice this week. I need reliable people, or I need to hire someone else. She called out to attend Uncle Raymond's funeral and to meet with Arthur Brennan. 2 absences in a week, which apparently made her unreliable despite working there for 18 months without missing a single shift. The economics of poverty, one crisis cascading into the next, each one making the following disaster more likely. She texted back, I understand. My uncle died. I'm handling his estate. I'll be back to normal schedule next week. The response came quickly. Sorry for your loss, but I have a business to run. Next week you're on probation. One more call out and I'll need to replace you. Maya set her phone down carefully, fighting the urge to throw it through the window. Probation at a coffee shop that paid $9 an hour and scheduled her for 27 hours per week specifically to avoid providing benefits. Probation for handling family responsibilities. Probation for being human instead of reliably desperate. She checked on Lily, who'd fallen asleep on the couch, her breathing even now the crisis passed. Maya covered her with a blanket and returned to the kitchen, where the eviction notice sat in its drawer alongside all the other documents testifying to her failures. 30 days to vacate. 26 days now. She'd been so focused on Uncle Raymond's apartment and the vault and the legal complexities that she'd barely considered her own housing crisis. Arthur had said to maintain routine, not make sudden changes. But how did you maintain routine when routine included eviction? She needed a new apartment, but apartments required first month, last month, security deposit. 3 times the monthly rent up front, which in any neighborhood safe enough for a 6-year-old with chronic asthma meant around $5,000. Money she didn't have and wouldn't have for 7 more days when the first trust distribution arrived. She could ask Arthur about emergency distribution, but that felt premature. 7 days wasn't unreasonable to wait. People waited longer than 7 days for things that mattered. She just needed to find somewhere temporary. Mrs. Kowalski had offered in the past, but her apartment was tiny, barely big enough for one person. There were shelters, but shelters separated families sometimes, and Maya had spent 6 years ensuring she and Lily stayed together through every crisis. She wasn't about to compromise that now, not when wealth was 7 days away. Her phone rang again. Marcus, his voice carrying a different quality this time. Not irritation, but something worse. Concern wrapped in accusation. Maya, I just talked to Dimitri again. He says a moving company is scheduled to come to the apartment tomorrow morning. A specialty company, not the regular movers. He's asking if we authorize this because apparently they quoted him a price that sounded excessive for standard furniture removal. Maya's pulse spiked. She'd forgotten that the building would be notified about the specialty movers. I arranged it for the filing cabinet. Silence on the line. Then Marcus's laugh, sharp and disbelieving. You hired professional movers for a filing cabinet? Maya, what the hell? Do you have any idea what that costs? Specialty movers charge $300 an hour minimum. For a filing cabinet you could drag to the dumpster yourself. It's heavy. I can't move it alone. Then I'll help you move it. Tomorrow morning, I'll come over, we'll carry it to the curb together. Cancel the movers. This is insane. I've already arranged it. Then unarrange it. You're about to be evicted, and you're spending hundreds of dollars to move junk? This is exactly the kind of decision-making that keeps you trapped in poverty, Maya. You don't think before spending money you don't have. She wanted to scream that she had $340 million, that Uncle Raymond had saved for 26 years, specifically so she'd never have to make decisions based on not having money. But Thomas's warning echoed in her mind. Sudden wealth makes you a target. Family members who didn't know you had money suddenly need it. I have my reasons. Your reasons are terrible. I'm coming over tomorrow morning to cancel those movers and help you dispose of that cabinet like you should have done in the first place. Marcus, don't. Someone has to save you from yourself. He hung up before she could argue further. Maya called Arthur immediately. My brother knows about the movers. He's planning to show up tomorrow morning to cancel them. Arthur's response was immediate and calm. The movers will arrive at 8 a.m. Be there at 7:45. When your brother shows up, tell him the cabinet has already been collected. If he asks where it went, say you found a storage facility that gave you a discount. Don't provide specifics. Keep it boring. He's not going to believe I found affordable storage. Then let him not believe you. His skepticism doesn't change facts. The cabinet will be in secure storage by the time he arrives. He can't cancel movers who've already completed their work. She agreed, but anxiety twisted her stomach. Marcus showing up meant confrontation. It meant questions she couldn't answer honestly without revealing information she'd been specifically instructed to keep secret. It meant navigating a conversation where she knew the truth and he didn't, performing poverty while wealth waited in a vault. That evening, while Lily ate dinner, Maya calculated how many more days until the first distribution arrived. 168 hours. 10,080 minutes. Time moved with cruel uniformity, refusing to accelerate based on need. Each hour felt weighted. Each day a test of whether she could maintain the fiction that nothing had changed while everything fundamental had shifted. She put Lily to bed early, reading 3 stories instead of the usual one. Her daughter asked why Maya seemed worried, demonstrating the perception children develop when stability depends on reading adult moods. Maya lied smoothly, saying she was just tired from cleaning Uncle Raymond's apartment. Lily accepted this with the trust of someone who hadn't yet learned that adults lie to protect children from truths they can't carry. After Lily fell asleep, Maya sat in the kitchen with Uncle Raymond's unfinished letter, reading it again. I watched you struggle for 6 years while your siblings pretended poverty was a choice you made rather than a trap built by systems they benefited from. He'd understood. He'd seen not just her poverty, but the structures that enforced it, the systems that blamed victims while rewarding those who'd never had to navigate them. She thought about Marcus, who believed his success was purely the result of hard work and smart decisions, who couldn't see that he'd started from a position that made success possible, with parents who'd paid for college, connections that opened doors, the luxury of taking unpaid internships because someone else covered his rent. He'd worked hard, yes, but he'd worked hard from a foundation most people never stood on. And now he was going to show up tomorrow morning to save her from herself, to prevent her from making the terrible decision of keeping her uncle's filing cabinet. The irony was so perfect, it would have been funny if it wasn't so exhausting. Maya set her alarm for 6 a.m. She'd need to be at Uncle Raymond's apartment before 7:45, before Marcus arrived with his reasonable arguments and his certainty that he knew better. She'd need to orchestrate the cabinet's removal, watch it disappear into secure storage, then face her brother with a lie that sounded plausible enough to avoid deeper questioning. Sleep came reluctantly. When it did, she dreamed of filing cabinets that multiplied endlessly, each one containing vaults she couldn't open, combinations she couldn't remember, wealth that remained tantalizingly out of reach no matter how many locks she solved. Morning arrived with mechanical precision. Maya woke Lily early, explaining they needed to go to Uncle Raymond's apartment before school. The girl accepted this without complaint, still tired enough to be compliant. They took the subway to Queens, arriving at the building at 7:30. Dimitri was in the lobby, his expression carrying suspicion and curiosity in equal measure. These movers you hired, they are very expensive company, very specialized. What is so special about old filing cabinet? Maya kept her voice casual, boring. It has sentimental value. Family documents. Family documents can go in boxes. Boxes are free. Movers for one piece of furniture. This is strange. My uncle left specific instructions about the cabinet. I'm following his wishes. Dmitri studied her with the assessment of someone who'd managed a building long enough to recognize when tenants were hiding something. But whatever he suspected, he kept it to himself. Your brother called this morning. Said he is coming. Said to not let movers take anything until he arrives. The movers are coming at 8. That's when they're scheduled. Your brother says 8:30. He's wrong. Dmitri shrugged, the gesture of someone who'd learned that family disputes were best observed from a distance. It's not my business. I just manage building. You do what you want. Maya and Lily went up to apartment 4C. She unlocked the door, revealing the space now partially cleared of Uncle Raymond's other belongings. Books boxed, furniture tagged for donation, kitchen cleared. Only the filing cabinet remained, standing against its wall with the weight of everything it contained. The movers arrived at 7:55, 3 men wearing uniforms from company Maya didn't recognize. Professional, efficient, carrying equipment designed specifically for moving heavy objects without damage. They examined the cabinet with experienced attention, discussing weight distribution and door clearances in technical language that suggested they'd done this many times before. You'll need to empty the drawers, the lead mover said. Weight's too concentrated otherwise. Could damage the tracks. Maya's heart jumped. The contents need to stay private. We're not interested in what's inside, ma'am. We just need drawers empty so the cabinet doesn't collapse under its own weight during transport. She hadn't anticipated this. She'd assumed the cabinet would be moved intact, contents secured. She looked at Lily, who was examining the mover's equipment with curious attention, then at the filing cabinet, which suddenly felt like a ticking bomb. Can you give me 10 minutes? Take your time. We need to bring the truck around anyway. They left. Maya immediately opened the bottom drawer, accessing the vault. She couldn't leave $340 million worth of bearer bonds sitting in an unlocked drawer while movers handled the cabinet. She pulled out the leather portfolio containing the most valuable documents, the bearer bonds and their protective sleeves, the gold certificates. Everything that Arthur had specifically said needed to remain secure. She looked around the apartment, searching for somewhere to temporarily hide wealth that didn't fit in any container she had with her. Her purse was too small, her backpack barely larger. Lily's school bag could fit some items, but not everything. The documents were too valuable to leave in the apartment, too sensitive to trust the spaces she couldn't monitor. Footsteps in the hallway. Marcus's voice, loud and irritated. Maya, you in there? She frantically shoved the portfolio back into the vault, closed the door, replaced the base panel. Marcus knocked, impatient and sharp. She checked that the cabinet appeared normal, drawers properly seated, no visible evidence of the vault. Then she opened the apartment door. Marcus pushed past her without greeting, his expression already set to confrontation. Jennifer followed, equally annoyed. Vanessa trailed behind, scrolling her phone, present but not participating. The three of them filled the small apartment with expensive clothes and exasperation. Where are the movers? Marcus demanded. Downstairs, getting their truck. Good, then we have time. Maya, I need you to listen to me. You cannot afford to move this filing cabinet. I checked prices. Specialty movers for a single item cost minimum $500. You have $17 in your checking account. Maya's breath caught. How do you know what's in my checking account? Because I called your bank last week to check on you. Because I was worried. Because someone needs to pay attention to your finances since you clearly aren't. You call my bank? Marcus, that's illegal. They can't tell you my account balance. I'm a co-signer from when you opened the account 6 years ago, remember? When you needed someone with good credit to vouch for you. Which means I have access to see what's going on. And what's going on is that you're about to be evicted while hiring expensive movers for garbage. Jennifer stepped forward, her voice carrying practiced sympathy. Maya, we're not trying to be mean. We're trying to help. This filing cabinet is not worth the cost. Emotionally, I understand you feel attached. But emotionally is not the same as practically. You need to think about Lily. The invocation of her daughter's name, wielded like a weapon by people who'd never offered to help with Lily's medical expenses, ignited something in Maya's chest. Don't bring Lily into this. She's already in this, Marcus said. She's in this every time you make bad decisions that affect her stability. This filing cabinet is a bad decision. Cancel the movers. Let me help you carry it to the dumpster. Use that $500 to pay rent instead. I'm not throwing it away. Then you're choosing sentiment over your daughter's housing. I'm choosing to honor Uncle Raymond's wishes. Uncle Raymond is dead. His wishes don't pay your bills. The movers returned before Maya could respond, their footsteps heavy on the stairs. The lead mover appeared in the doorway, glancing between the assembled family members with the caution of someone walking into a situation he didn't understand. Ma'am, we're ready to proceed. We'll need you to empty the drawers as discussed. Marcus turned to the mover. Actually, there's been a change. We're canceling the service. The mover looked at Maya. Ma'am. Maya met Marcus's eyes. 6 years of being told she made bad decisions. 6 years of being offered opinions instead of help. 6 years of being treated like a child who couldn't be trusted with her own life. And now, finally, she had power he didn't know about, resources he couldn't access, an entire vault of wealth he'd told her to throw away because he couldn't imagine anything valuable existing where he hadn't placed it. The service isn't canceled, she said clearly. Please proceed. Marcus's face flushed. Maya, I'm trying to save you from yourself. I don't need saving. You're about to be evicted. I'll figure it out. How? With what money? The question hung in the air, demanding an answer she couldn't give without revealing everything. Maya looked at her brother, seeing not just Marcus but the entire dynamic they'd inhabited for years. Him certain, her doubting. Him lecturing, her accepting. Him defining reality, her adapting to his definitions. Not anymore. I'll figure it out, she repeated. Now, please leave. I need to work with the movers. Jennifer touched Marcus's arm, a gesture that meant they'd argued enough in public. Vanessa was already heading toward the door, clearly bored with family drama that didn't directly affect her. Marcus stared at Maya for a long moment, his expression mixing anger and something that might have been hurt. Fine. Keep your junk. But when this falls apart, don't call me. I'm done trying to help someone who refuses to be helped. He left, Jennifer following, Vanessa already halfway down the hall. The door closed behind them with finality that echoed in the empty apartment. Maya's hands shook, adrenaline flooding through her system. She'd just burned a bridge she'd spent 6 years carefully maintaining, severed a connection she'd thought she needed for survival. The lead mover cleared his throat gently. Family's complicated. Maya laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. That's one word for it. Should we proceed? She nodded, watching as the movers systematically emptied each drawer, placing contents in secure containers they'd brought for that purpose. Files, documents, folders, all handled with professional care and complete disinterest in their contents. When they reached the bottom drawer, Maya stopped them. I need to remove something first. She accessed the vault one final time, pulling out the leather portfolio and the bag of gold coins. The movers didn't comment, didn't even seem particularly curious. To them, this was just another job, another filing cabinet, another family's complicated possessions being transferred from one location to another. With the drawers empty, the cabinet became manageable. The movers wrapped it in protective padding, secured it with straps, carried it down 4 flights of stairs with coordinated efficiency. Maya followed with Lily, the portfolio clutched against her chest, the weight of everything it represented pressing against her ribs. Dmitri watched from the lobby, his expression unreadable. Outside, a truck waited, specially designed for transporting sensitive items. The cabinet disappeared inside, the doors closed, and, just like that, Uncle Raymond's most personal possession was gone, heading to secure storage where her family would never find it. The lead mover handed her a receipt and a business card. Delivery to storage facility will be complete by noon. You can access your unit anytime between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. with the code on the card. Your attorney has already paid the first year in full. They drove away. Maya stood on the sidewalk holding Lily's hand, clutching a portfolio worth hundreds of millions of dollars, watching the truck disappear into Queens traffic. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. You're making a huge mistake. Don't come crying to me when reality catches up. She didn't respond. Instead, she called Arthur Brennan. The cabinet's secure. My brother knows something's happening, but not what. He's angry I kept it. Good, Arthur said, surprising her. His anger means he's not asking the right questions. Angry people make assumptions. They fill in blanks with their own narratives. Let it be angry. It's the best protection you have right now. Maya walked Lily to school, late now, but not caring. The morning had fractured something in her relationship with Marcus, maybe permanently. She'd chosen Uncle Raymond's filing cabinet over her brother's approval. She'd chosen trust in a dead man's planning over a living man's certainty. And in 7 days, when $50,000 appeared in her new bank account, she'd know whether that choice had been wisdom or delusion. The days between securing the filing cabinet and receiving the first trust distribution felt like living in two realities simultaneously. In one reality, Maya was still the woman being evicted in 23 days, still working 3 part-time jobs, still counting dollars while Lily's medication bottles emptied toward refills she couldn't afford. In the other reality, she carried a portfolio containing hundreds of millions of dollars in bearer bonds, waiting for Arthur Brennan's complex legal machinery to transform invisible wealth into accessible money. The disconnect was maddening. She'd wake at night, convinced the entire thing had been hallucination. Uncle Raymond's vault, the bearer bonds, Arthur's office with its views of Manhattan, all of it dream logic that would evaporate under scrutiny. Then she'd check the business card on her nightstand, solid and real, Arthur Brennan's contact information embossed in expensive lettering that didn't exist in dreams. Marcus stopped calling after the confrontation at Uncle Raymond's apartment. Vanessa sent one text. Marcus says you kept the filing cabinet. Weird flex, but okay. Then returned to her usual silence. The absence of their contact should have felt liberating. Instead, it amplified Maya's isolation. She was carrying the biggest secret of her life with no one to tell, no one who would understand or believe. On day 4 after the vault's discovery, Maya returned to Uncle Raymond's apartment to finish the clearing process. Most furniture had been donated, most papers discarded or boxed for storage. What remained were the small personal items that accumulate over 40 years, kitchen utensils, toiletries, clothes that smelled like a stranger despite being family. The landlord wanted the apartment empty by Friday, 2 days away. She worked methodically, boxing items, wiping surfaces, erasing evidence of Uncle Raymond's residence. The apartment felt different with the filing cabinet gone. Lighter, but also emptier in a way that went beyond physical space. The cabinet had been Uncle Raymond's monument to systematic preservation. Without it, the apartment was just rooms. In the bedroom closet, behind winter coats Uncle Raymond would never need again, Maya found a cardboard box she'd missed during earlier sorting. Smaller than a shoebox, taped shut, her name written on the lid in Uncle Raymond's handwriting. The date beneath her name made her breath catch. 3 months ago. He prepared this shortly before his death, knowing time was running out. She sat on his bed and opened the box carefully. Inside, a USB drive, another letter, and a small leather journal. The letter was addressed to her with the same shaky handwriting as his previous message. Maya, if you're reading this, you found the vault and met with Arthur. You probably have questions I didn't answer in my first letter. Questions about why I waited, why I watched from a distance, why I chose silence over connection. This journal contains some answers. I started writing it 6 years ago when Lily was born. It's not a complete record of my thoughts. I was never good at expressing feelings, but it's what I managed. The USB drive contains scanned documents. Financial records, yes, but also photographs I took over the years. Places you lived, schools Lily attended, moments I witnessed from distances you didn't notice. I know how this sounds. Creepy, probably. Invasive, certainly. But it was the only way I knew to be family when I didn't know how to be family directly. The journal and the drive will help you understand the vault better. They'll explain why certain choices were made, why specific structures were built. Arthur knows they exist, but hasn't seen their contents. That's for you alone. I hope they provide the context I couldn't give you while I was alive. Uncle Raymond. Maya opened the journal with trembling hands. The first entry was dated August 10th, 2018. exactly 1 week after Lily's birth. I stood outside the hospital today, 3 hours in the visitor's parking lot, close enough to see the maternity ward windows, too frightened to go inside. Maya had a daughter, my great-niece. The family tree extending another generation while I remained a severed branch, connected by blood, but not by presence. I wanted to meet the baby. I wanted to tell Maya I was proud of her for choosing to keep the child despite circumstances that made that choice nearly impossible. But I'm a 58-year-old man who hasn't spoken to his niece in a decade. How do you bridge that gap without looking foolish? Without seeming like you're inserting yourself into a life that's managed without you? So I stood in the parking lot like a coward. And when I left, I went to my bank and began planning. If I couldn't be present, I could at least be useful. If I couldn't offer words, I could offer resources. 26 years of municipal employment had taught me that documentation matters more than intention. Systems respond to paper trails, not promises. I would build Maya a paper trail that led to security. The entries continued chronologically. Uncle Raymond documenting moments he'd witnessed from a distance. Maya bringing Lily home from the hospital to an apartment Uncle Raymond described as too small, too expensive, but clean and safe. She's doing her best. The first time Lily had a serious asthma attack, and Maya took her to the emergency room at 2 in the morning, Uncle Raymond somehow knowing and documenting it, though he never explained how he'd learned. November 2018. Maya lost her job today. The company downsized, letting go of recent hires first. I watched her leave the building carrying a box of personal items, trying not to cry in front of strangers. She has a 3-month-old daughter and no income. I withdrew $30,000 from my savings and brought it to her apartment, intending to give it as a gift. I stood in the hallway for 20 minutes, holding an envelope with cash, unable to knock on her door. She would have asked where the money came from. I would have had to explain I'd been watching, tracking, documenting. She would have thought I was strange or worse. I put the money back in my account and made a different plan. If I couldn't help now, I'd help comprehensively later. I increased my monthly investment allocation by another $500. Every dollar I didn't spend on helping Maya immediately became another dollar invested for helping her eventually. The pattern repeated through the journal. Uncle Raymond witnessing struggles, wanting to intervene, choosing instead to document and save. Christmas 2019, Lily's second Christmas. Maya couldn't afford presents, so she wrapped items from the dollar store in newspaper and told Lily that Santa was on a budget this year. I bought a $200 toy piano I saw Lily looking at in a store window. Brought it to Maya's door. Couldn't knock. Donated it to a children's charity instead. Added $200 to my investment account. Maya's vision blurred with tears that were part gratitude, part fury. Uncle Raymond had been there for every crisis, watching her struggle while choosing accumulation over alleviation. Each entry revealed the same pattern. Witness suffering, feel guilt, respond by saving money instead of offering help. It was systematic emotional cowardice dressed up as financial planning. But the journal also revealed something else. Uncle Raymond's investments hadn't been random. He'd researched extensively, studying financial systems with the same precision he'd applied to municipal filing. Bearer bonds purchased before 1982 when they became unavailable. Gold certificates acquired through channels that no longer existed. Offshore accounts established during brief windows when regulations permitted structures that were later banned. March 2020. The pandemic will change everything. Financial systems are about to experience chaos. Maya just lost 2 of her 3 jobs. Lily's asthma makes her high risk, so Maya can't even look for in-person work that might be available. I'm watching her drown in real time while sitting on $180 million in assets I can't give her without triggering tax consequences that would consume half of it. The bearer bonds have appreciated faster than I projected. The offshore accounts have grown beyond my most optimistic estimates. I've created a fortress of wealth while Maya lives in a tent outside its walls. Arthur keeps asking when I'm going to tell her. I keep saying soon, while knowing I mean never. At least not while I'm alive to face her questions. I'm a coward. But I'm a coward who's built something that will matter when I finally stop being afraid. The journal entries became shorter, more clinical, as Uncle Raymond's health declined. By late 2024, his handwriting had deteriorated significantly. Entries reduced to brief notes. Heart palpitations again. Doctor says slow down. But slowing down means less time to build what Maya needs. Increase my hours at work to maximize final pension contributions. Every dollar of pension becomes another dollar Maya receives later. The final entry was dated January 2025, 2 months before his death. Arthur says I should tell Maya directly. Set up a meeting, explain everything, transfer the wealth while I'm alive to answer questions. He's right. I know he's right. But I've been silent for so long that speaking now feels impossible. How do I explain that I watched her suffer because I was building her salvation? How do I justify choosing future security over present relief? I can't, so I won't. I'll die like I lived, at a distance, documenting instead of connecting, filing paperwork instead of building relationships. But Maya will have $340 million. She'll have security I never had, resources my generation couldn't imagine, freedom to choose rather than accept. Maybe that's enough. Maybe utility matters more than connection. The filing cabinet contains everything she needs. Arthur will guide her through the complications. And I'll be gone, unavailable for the conversations I never learned how to have. I'm sorry, Maya, for all of it. For watching instead of helping, for saving instead of giving, for being the kind of family member who expresses love through financial instruments rather than presents. But I'm not sorry for building this. You deserve better than what you got. At least now you'll have resources to build something better for Lily. That has to count for something. Maya closed the journal, her hands shaking with emotions she couldn't separate into distinct categories. Uncle Raymond had built her a fortune while watching her suffer, convinced that comprehensive future helped justify withholding immediate relief. The logic was inhuman and entirely understandable simultaneously. He'd been a man who processed the world through systems and documentation, trying to express love in the only language he knew fluently. She inserted the USB drive in her laptop. The files were organized with Uncle Raymond's characteristic precision. Folders labeled by year, subfolders by category. She opened the one marked Photographs, Maya and Lily. Hundreds of images appeared. Not close-ups, but distant shots. Maya leaving her apartment building at different addresses over the years. Lily playing in playground while Maya watched from a bench, her exhaustion visible even from whatever distance Uncle Raymond had maintained. The coffee shop where Maya had worked, photographed from across the street. The hospital where Lily received treatments, documented from the parking lot. Each photograph was time-stamped and annotated. Uncle Raymond had been building an archive, evidence of her life, preserved with archival precision. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being seen by someone who didn't know any other way to look. The financial folders contained scanned documents Arthur had already shown her, but also spreadsheets Uncle Raymond had maintained tracking every investment, every bearer bond purchase, every offshore deposit. The precision was staggering. 40 years of financial activity, every transaction recorded, categorized, analyzed. One spreadsheet was titled Maya's Timeline, Crisis Points. It listed dates alongside events. March 2019, Lily's emergency room visit cost $2,800. Maya's checking account balance, $340. Result, payment plan established, collections initiated. Uncle Raymond had been tracking not just her life, but her financial disasters specifically, documenting each crisis while calculating how much his eventual inheritance would offset. Another spreadsheet, projected distribution schedule. Uncle Raymond had worked with Arthur to plan exactly how the wealth would transfer. Monthly distributions starting at $50,000, increasing gradually. Emergency provisions for medical costs, housing, education. Trust for Lily's future. Everything mapped out with the precision of a man who'd spent 40 years filing other people's paperwork and had finally applied that expertise to his own legacy. Maya was crying now, full sobs she couldn't control. Uncle Raymond had been family in the most dysfunctional way possible, present but absent, caring but distant, loving her through spreadsheets and investment strategies instead of phone calls and visits. And somehow, impossibly, it had resulted in $340 million waiting to transform her life. Her phone rang. Arthur Brennan, his voice carrying the precise calm she'd come to associate with him. "Maya, I wanted to give you advance notice. The first distribution will arrive tomorrow morning, day earlier than projected. $50,000. Your new account is established. Security measures are in place. Tomorrow, this becomes real." I found his journal and photographs. He was watching me for years. I know. He showed me some of it when we were setting up the trust structures. I told him it was uncomfortable. He said it was the only way he knew to care. Why didn't he just help me while he was alive? Arthur's pause carried weight. Because he was terrified you'd refuse. Because he'd watched your siblings develop a particular relationship with money. Marcus treating wealth as proof of personal virtue. Vanessa viewing it as permission to ignore other struggles. Raymond was afraid that if he offered help directly, you'd either refuse out of pride or accept and become dependent. He wanted to give you resources after he was gone, when they came without strings or obligations or the complicated dynamics living benefactors create. That's messed up. Yes, but it's also $340 million. Sometimes messed up people build beautiful things through dysfunction rather than despite it. They talked for another 20 minutes. Arthur explained that tomorrow's deposit would appear as a trust distribution, completely legal, fully documented. Maya could spend on anything: rent, medical bills, food, clothing, anything normal. The key was keeping her lifestyle changes gradual rather than dramatic. No sudden luxury purchases, no flashy displays of wealth. What about my eviction notice? I have 21 days left. Find new apartment. Nothing extravagant. 2-bedroom, decent neighborhood, safe for Lily. First month, last month, security deposit will barely touch your first distribution. Move quietly like someone who got a small inheritance and is using it responsibly, which technically is exactly what's happening. After the call, Maya sat in Uncle Raymond's empty apartment, surrounded by the last remnants of a life lived in careful isolation. She cleared everything except a few items she wanted to keep. His reading glasses, a coffee mug with a municipal logo, the shoebox of photographs from his closet. Small objects that represented a man she'd barely known, but who'd known her better than almost anyone. The landlord appeared at 6 p.m. with a clipboard and final inspection form. He walked through rooms, checking for damage, noting cleanliness. His expression suggested surprise at the apartment's condition. Most people leave mess. You did good work here. My uncle would have wanted it clean. Your uncle was good tenant. 40 years, never late, never problem. Building won't be same without people like him. The landlord's accent softened slightly, genuine regret breaking through bureaucratic efficiency. New owners, they don't care about good tenants. They care about profit. Everything's changing. Maya accepted the keys, return receipt, and left Uncle Raymond's building for the last time. The neighborhood looked different now, knowing she'd never return. 40 years of her uncle's life, condensed to boxes in storage and money in a vault. She took the subway home, clutching the journal and USB drive, artifacts of surveillance that felt more like love letters written in a language only Uncle Raymond spoke. That evening, she told Lily they were going apartment hunting this weekend. Her daughter's face lit up with cautious hope. Does this mean we don't have to move to a shelter? The question broke Maya's heart. Lily was 6 years old and already understood that housing was conditional, that stability couldn't be assumed. No shelters, baby. We're going to find a nice place. 2 bedrooms, so you can have your own room. My own room. Lily's voice carried wonder reserved for impossible wishes. We'll have a window. Yes. And a closet for your clothes. And space for books and toys. Can we afford that? Maya pulled Lily close, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo and childhood innocence that still believed adults had answers. Uncle Raymond left us some money. Not a lot. The lie came easier than expected, but enough to move somewhere better. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, was Uncle Raymond nice? I think he tried to be. He just didn't know how to show in ways people usually recognize. That night, Maya barely slept. Tomorrow morning, $50,000 would appear in her account. Tomorrow, poverty would begin its slow retreat, defeated not by hard work or better choices, but by a dead man's systematic accumulation over decades. The randomness bothered her more than she'd expected. She'd done nothing to earn this wealth, except be Uncle Raymond's niece, and struggle visibly enough for him to notice from a distance. At 3 a.m., still awake, she opened her laptop and searched for apartments in neighborhoods she'd never considered accessible. 2 bedrooms, safe areas, good schools. Places where Lily could play outside without Maya calculating acceptable risk levels. The listings felt like browsing a different dimension where normal people lived normal lives without constant crisis. She found one possibility: a 2-bedroom in a building with a doorman 20 minutes from Lily's current school. First month, $2,400. Last month, $2,400. Security deposit, $2,400. Total, $7,200 upfront. Last week, that number would have been impossible. Tomorrow, it will be less than 15% of her first trust distribution. Morning came eventually. Maya went through her routine mechanically. Breakfast, getting Lily ready for school, the subway commute. She dropped Lily off, and then, instead of heading to her shift at the coffee shop, she walked to a Chase Bank branch 3 blocks away. Arthur had set up her account here, chosen specifically for being large enough to not question deposits while being generic enough to not attract attention. She approached a teller with her new account information. "I'm expecting a deposit this morning. Can you check if it's arrived?" The teller pulled up her account, her expression neutral. "Yes, ma'am. Deposit posted at 8 a.m. $50,000 from Brennan and Associates Trust Services." The words hung in the air. $50,000. Real. Present. Accessible. Maya's knees felt weak. "Can you show me the balance?" The teller turned the screen slightly. There it was in digital precision. $50,000. Available balance. $50,000. After years of checking accounts that hovered between $0 and $300, the number looked like a typo. "Would you like to make a withdrawal?" Maya shook her head. Speaking felt impossible. She accepted a printed balance receipt and left the bank, stepping onto a Manhattan sidewalk where nothing looked different despite everything being fundamentally changed. She had $50,000. In 1 month, she'd have another $50,000. In 6 months, $100,000 monthly. The progression felt like science fiction. Her phone buzzed. Text from her coffee shop manager. "Where are you?" "You're scheduled for the 9 a.m. shift." Maya stared at the message. The job paid $9 an hour. Even working full 40-hour weeks, which they never scheduled her for, she'd make maybe $1,500 monthly before taxes. She was carrying a bank receipt showing $50,000 in her account, with another $50,000 arriving in 30 days. She typed a response. "I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice. Family situation requires my full attention." The response was immediate. 2 weeks' notice for a part-time job? Just quit if you're going to quit. We'll find someone more reliable. Maya felt a bubble of laughter rise in her chest. More reliable. She'd worked there 18 months, covering every shift they'd assigned, handling every last-minute schedule change. But 2 weeks' notice made her unreliable. The economics of poverty laid bare. You're only valuable while you're desperate. She texted back, "Okay, I quit effective immediately." The liberation was dizzying. 1 job down. She had 2 others, weekend data entry and evening bookstore shifts. Both paid similarly terrible wages for similarly unreliable hours. She'd keep them for now, following Arthur's advice about gradual lifestyle changes. But knowing she could quit anytime transformed the jobs from necessities into choices. She called the apartment listing she'd found last night. Yes, the unit was still available. Yes, she could see it this afternoon. She took the subway to the address, a neighborhood she'd walked through before while thinking people like me don't live here. The building was exactly as the listing described. Clean, secure, professionally managed. The apartment showed well. 2 real bedrooms, updated kitchen, windows that actually let in light. The rental agent explained the requirements. First month, last month, security deposit, proof of income. Maya's heart sank at the income requirement. I'm currently between jobs, but I can pay 6 months up front if that helps. The agent's eyebrows rose. 6 months? That's $14,400. I can write a check today. Something shifted in the agent's demeanor. People who could write 5-figure checks commanded different treatment than people asking about payment plans. Let me talk to the building manager. That kind of financial commitment might override the usual employment verification. 20 minutes later, Maya had been approved. The agent prepared paperwork while Maya wrote a check for $14,400, watching her balance drop from $50,000 to $35,600. The numbers felt surreal. Yesterday, $14,000 would have represented years of saving. Today, it was less than 1 month's trust distribution. She signed the lease in a daze. Move-in date, this weekend. Keys available Friday. Suddenly, impossibly, she and Lily had a home. A real home with a lease and legal protections. Not a month-to-month situation that could be terminated with 30 days' notice. A full year of guaranteed housing. Walking back to the subway, Maya realized she was crying again. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming whiplash of 48 hours that had transformed everything. Monday, she'd been facing eviction. Wednesday, she had a new apartment and $35,600 in the bank. Her phone rang. Marcus, his voice carrying stiff formality. Maya, I wanted to apologize for how I spoke to you at Uncle Raymond's apartment. Jennifer pointed out that I was being controlling. You have the right to make your own decisions, even ones I disagree with. The apology felt performative, but Maya accepted it. Thank you for saying that. Have you finished clearing the apartment? Yes. Landlord signed off yesterday. And the filing cabinet? Where did you end up putting it? Maya heard the real question beneath his words. Did you realize I was right and throw it away after all? Secure storage. Climate-controlled, fully insured. That must be expensive. It's manageable. Silence on the line. Marcus processing her vague response. Maya, is everything okay? You sound different. She almost laughed. Different? Yes, having $340 million waiting in a vault tended to change your tone. I'm fine, just tired from clearing the apartment. Well, the estate's settled. Your $5,000 share will be direct deposited tomorrow. At least Uncle Raymond left you something useful, even if most of his stuff was junk. $5,000. The amount that had seemed significant a week ago now felt almost quaint. Thanks for handling that. That's what family does. Listen, I know we've had our differences, but if you need help with anything, let me know. Jennifer and I are here for you. The offer rang hollow after he'd spent weeks telling her to throw away a fortune. But Maya made appropriate grateful sounds and ended the call. Marcus meant well, in his way. He just couldn't imagine realities different from his own experience. Over the next 3 days, Maya moved through tasks that should have been impossible. She bought furniture, not expensive pieces, but new items that didn't come from donation centers or curb piles. She hired movers who charged reasonable rates because she could afford them. She enrolled Lily in an after-school program that cost $200 monthly, but included homework, help, and recreational activities. Each expense felt momentous and trivial simultaneously. Momentous because Maya had spent 6 years calculating whether she could afford dollar store purchases. Trivial because her bank balance barely moved despite spending thousands of dollars. Friday arrived. Maya and Lily moved into their new apartment with help from movers who carried boxes efficiently, while Lily ran from room to room, claiming spaces. This is my room, and this is my closet, and I can see trees from my window. Mrs. Kowalski came to see the new place, bringing cookies and tears. So much better than old apartment. This is good for Lily, good for you. You deserve this, Maya. You worked so hard. The words created complicated feelings. Maya hadn't worked harder this week than she had the previous year. She just inherited money from an uncle who'd saved systematically while watching her struggle. The wealth felt unearned, which made it simultaneously wonderful and uncomfortable. That evening, after Lily fell asleep in her new bedroom, Maya sat in her new living room and called Arthur Brennan. I kept expecting something to go wrong, for the money to disappear, or someone to say there'd been a mistake. No mistakes. This is real. You're going to receive these distributions monthly for the next 2 years. After that, you'll have full access to the remaining principal. How does it feel? Surreal. Wrong, almost. Like I'm getting away with something. You're not getting away with anything. You're receiving an inheritance your uncle spent 26 years building. Many people inherit wealth they didn't earn. The difference is that most wealthy families teach their children that inherited wealth is normal and deserved. Your uncle couldn't teach you that while he was alive, so I'll say it now. This money is yours. Not as charity, not as luck, but as inheritance. Accept it. After the call, Maya opened Uncle Raymond's journal again, reading entries she'd skipped before. In late 2020, he'd written, "Arthur asked me today what I wanted Maya to do with the money after I'm gone. I told him I didn't care about specific choices. I cared about freedom. Freedom to choose rather than accept. Freedom to say no to things that exploit her desperation. Freedom to build the kind of life she'd have built if the system wasn't designed to prevent people like her from accumulating resources. That's what the money is for. Not houses or cars or luxury. Freedom." The word resonated. Freedom. Maya had spent 6 years without it, trapped in decisions made by necessity rather than preference. The apartment she'd lived in because it was cheapest available, not because it was safe. The job she'd worked because they didn't require credentials she couldn't afford, not because they paid fairly. The medication she'd bought for Lily even when it meant not eating, because some choices weren't choices at all. Now she had freedom, not unlimited. $340 million was finite, despite seeming infinite, but enough freedom that her decisions could be based on what was best rather than what was barely possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Chen, this is Robert Walsh from Brennan & Associates. Arthur asked me to inform you that we've identified an irregularity in one of the offshore account transfers. Nothing serious, but we need to discuss it. Can you come to the office Monday at 10 a.m.? Maya's stomach dropped. Irregularity. The word carried implications of mistakes, of money that might not be real after all, of the universe correcting an error that had temporarily placed wealth in her undeserving hands. She texted back, "What kind of irregularity?" The response came quickly. "Nothing to worry about. Just technical details we need to clarify. Arthur will explain Monday." She tried calling Arthur, but it went to voicemail. She tried Robert Walsh directly. Same result. It was 8 p.m. on a Friday. Of course they weren't answering, but the timing felt cruel. An entire weekend to worry about irregularities that might dissolve her newfound security. Saturday morning brought another surprise. Marcus appeared at her new apartment building's lobby, telling the doorman he was there to see his sister. The doorman called up, his voice professionally neutral. "You have a visitor, Miss Chen. Marcus Chen says he's your brother. Send him up." Marcus emerged from the elevator, looking around the lobby with obvious assessment. His expression when he reached her door was complicated, surprise mixed with something that might have been suspicion. "This is where you moved? Maya, this building has a doorman. This is not cheap housing. It's what I could afford with Uncle Raymond's $5,000 and some savings." He walked past her into the apartment, taking in the new furniture, the space, the obvious upgrade from her previous situation. "Savings? You told me last month you had $17 in checking. I had savings I didn't tell you about." The lie came easily. "I've been putting away money when I could." "In what? A mattress?" "Because I checked your bank account last week, and there were no savings accounts listed." "You need to stop checking my bank account, Marcus. It's invasive and probably illegal. I'm a co-signer. It's not illegal. It's family looking out for family." Lily emerged from her bedroom, still in pajamas, excited to show Uncle Marcus her new room. Marcus followed her with visible confusion, examining the space with the attention of someone who didn't understand how the numbers worked. When Lily ran to the bathroom, Marcus turned to Maya with direct confrontation. "Something's going on. You couldn't afford your old apartment 3 weeks ago. Now you're in a place that costs at least $2,400 monthly with new furniture and what looks like first-class moving services. Where did this money come from?" "I told you. Uncle Raymond's inheritance and savings. $5,000 doesn't cover this. Not even close. Did you borrow money? Because if you took out loans thinking you can afford payments, you're setting yourself up for disaster. I didn't take out loans. Then where did this come from, Maya? I'm not trying to be controlling. I'm trying to understand how you went from eviction notice poor to doorman building comfortable in 2 weeks. Maya met his eyes, seeing genuine confusion beneath the interrogation. Marcus couldn't imagine a scenario where she'd suddenly accessed wealth he didn't know about. His worldview required her to be the struggling sister he occasionally helped while mostly judged. Her sudden improvement didn't fit that narrative. Uncle Raymond left me more than you knew about. That filing cabinet you wanted me to throw away? It had important documents. Financial documents. I'm being taken care of, Marcus. You don't need to worry. How much more? Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving you. His face flushed with frustration and something darker. You're hiding something. You found money in that apartment, didn't you? Cash Uncle Raymond had stashed. And you're not sharing it with me and Vanessa. The accusation was so close to truth and so far from understanding simultaneously. Yes, she'd found money. No, she wasn't sharing. But Marcus's framing, that she'd found cash and was being greedy, missed the entire reality of Uncle Raymond's systematic accumulation. I'm not discussing this anymore. I appreciate your concern, but my finances are not your business. They are when you're lying about them. Maya, if you found significant cash, that's part of the estate. It needs to be reported and split 3 ways. Hiding it is illegal. I'm not hiding anything illegal. Everything I have was left to me legitimately. If you don't believe that, call Uncle Raymond's lawyer. Maybe I will. Feel free. His name is Arthur Brennan. Brennan and Associates, 5th Avenue. He'll be happy to explain that everything is legal and proper. Marcus stared at her, recognition dawning. You hired a 5th Avenue attorney? Maya, those guys charge $500 an hour. How are you affording that? He's already paid for. By Uncle Raymond. Through the estate. That doesn't make sense. Uncle Raymond lived like a monk. He didn't have 5th Avenue attorney money. Apparently he did. Apparently there's a lot you didn't know about Uncle Raymond. A lot none of us knew. Lily returned, oblivious to the tension, chattering about her new school and the after-school program she'd start Monday. Marcus listened with visible distraction, his mind clearly trying to solve an equation that didn't balance. When he left, his goodbye was stiff, formal, carrying the weight of questions he decided not to ask directly, but wouldn't stop investigating privately. After he left, Maya's phone rang. Arthur Brennan, his voice carrying weekend casual warmth. Robert said he texted you about Monday's meeting. I wanted to assure you before you spent the weekend worrying. The irregularity is minor. One of the offshore accounts had a routing number change we didn't catch. Easily fixed, no impact on your distributions. So everything's okay? Everything's perfect. How's the new apartment? Marcus just visited. He's suspicious. He knows something doesn't add up. Let him be suspicious. Suspicion without evidence is just speculation. Unless you tell him about the vault, there's nothing he can prove or access. The trust is ironclad. Your inheritance is protected. They talked for a few more minutes before Arthur had to leave for family obligations. Maya sat in her new living room, watching Lily play with toys they'd bought this week, thinking about Marcus's suspicions and Robert's irregularity and the persistent feeling that something this good couldn't last. Monday's meeting would bring answers. Either confirmation that everything was solid or revelation that she'd been living in a temporary dream about to collapse back into reality. She opened Uncle Raymond's journal again, finding an entry from late 2023. Arthur warns that when Maya receives the inheritance, people will question it. Her siblings especially. They've spent years believing she's poor because she makes bad choices. Her sudden wealth will challenge that narrative. They'll either accept that their understanding was wrong, or they'll create alternative explanations that preserve their worldview. I suspect they'll choose the latter. Humans prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Let them be suspicious. The trust is built to withstand scrutiny. Maya's inheritance is protected by law and documentation. No amount of family drama can touch it. Uncle Raymond had anticipated this. He'd built structures specifically to protect Maya not just from financial predation, but from family members who would question whether she deserved wealth they'd never imagined her possessing. Sunday passed in slow anxiety. Monday morning, Maya took Lily to school, then subway to Fifth Avenue. Brennan and Associates' lobby felt different this time. Less intimidating, more familiar. The receptionist recognized her, offered coffee without asking, treated her like someone who belonged. Arthur's office held the same group as before: Arthur, Judith, Robert, Thomas. But this time, their expressions carried excitement rather than professional neutrality. Arthur gestured for Maya to sit, his smile genuine and warm. "Maya, the irregularity Robert mentioned is actually very good news. The offshore account we thought held $8 million actually holds $23 million. Uncle Raymond apparently made some investment moves shortly before his death that we didn't have complete documentation for. Once we sorted the routing, the full balance became visible." Maya's mind stuttered over the numbers. $23 million instead of 8, which brings your total inheritance from $340 million to $355 million, Judith added. $15 million more than we initially calculated. Your distributions will increase accordingly after the first year. Robert slid a document across the table. We also found something else while investigating the routing issue. A safe deposit box at a bank in Queens. Uncle Raymond's will mentions it obliquely, but we didn't have a location until the offshore bank provided additional documentation. The box is registered in your name jointly with his. It's been there since 2018. What's in it? We don't know. It requires your physical presence to access. I've arranged for us to visit the bank tomorrow at 10 a.m. if you're available. Maya nodded, her mind racing. Another discovery. Another layer to Uncle Raymond's systematic preparation. The man had built redundancy into everything, ensuring that even if one part of his plan failed, alternatives existed. The meeting continued for another hour, Arthur and his team explaining the increased distribution schedule, updated trust documentation, revised timelines. By the time Maya left, her inheritance had grown by $15 million, and tomorrow promised another revelation. She walked through Manhattan in a daze, her phone buzzing periodically with texts she ignored. Marcus asking if she called Arthur yet. Vanessa suddenly interested in catching up. Mrs. Kowalski checking if Lily needed anything. Her bookstore job asking about her next shift. The world kept demanding attention while Maya tried to process that she now had $355 million instead of $340 million. The difference was $15 million, more than most people earned in multiple lifetimes, and it barely registered as significant compared to the baseline absurdity. Tomorrow she'd visit another bank, open another safe deposit box, discover whatever final secret Uncle Raymond had prepared. The filing cabinet had been only the beginning. Uncle Raymond had built layers of security, redundancy, protection. Every revelation suggested another waiting behind it. Maya took the subway home, picked up Lily from after-school program, made dinner in her new kitchen. They ate together at her new dining table while Lily talked about her day. Everything normal, everything mundane, everything completely transformed by wealth that Lily didn't know existed yet. That night, Maya dreamed about filing cabinets, multiplying endlessly. Each one contained a vault. Each vault held millions. Each discovery leading to another box that held another secret. In the dream, Uncle Raymond stood at a distance, watching without speaking, documenting her discoveries in a journal that grew thicker with every door she opened. She woke at 3 a.m., her heart racing, the dream's logic dissolving, but its unease persisting. Something about tomorrow's safe deposit box felt different. Uncle Raymond had built the trust, created the offshore accounts, purchased bearer bonds. All of that was financial engineering, complex but comprehensible. A safe deposit box suggested something else, something physical, something he'd wanted her to have but kept separate from the main inheritance. Maya couldn't sleep after that. She lay in her new bedroom in her new apartment, watching shadows move across unfamiliar ceiling, waiting for morning to bring whatever revelation Uncle Raymond had left in that box. The bank in Queens was unremarkable. The manager led Maya and Arthur to the vault, inserted his key alongside hers, and left them alone with the safe deposit box. Inside, Maya found a single envelope and a small wooden box. The envelope contained a letter in Uncle Raymond's handwriting, dated 1 week before his death. Maya, if you're reading this, you found everything else. The money, the trusts, the offshore accounts. By now you know I watched you struggle while accumulating wealth I was too frightened to share. This box contains what matters more than any of it. My final apology and proof that you were never invisible to me. Maya opened the wooden box with trembling hands. Inside, a collection of items that stopped her breath. Lily's hospital bracelet from her birth. A baby tooth Lily had lost 2 years ago that Maya had thrown away. Lily's first drawing from preschool. Birthday cards Maya had sent Uncle Raymond over the years. Cards she'd assumed he'd discarded. Photographs of Maya's parents, carefully preserved. And beneath everything, a small velvet bag. She opened it. Inside, her grandmother's engagement ring. The one that had been sold years ago when Maya's parents faced financial crisis. Uncle Raymond had bought it back, had kept it safe, had preserved it for the moment Maya could receive it without the weight of poverty, making it feel like one more thing to lose. Arthur's voice was gentle. He wanted you to know he kept pieces of your life safe when you couldn't, that he saw every moment that mattered. Maya clutched the ring, tears streaming. Uncle Raymond hadn't just given her money. He'd given her proof that she'd been cherished while feeling abandoned. That family existed even in silence. 6 months later, Maya stood in a doctor's office with Lily, discussing not whether they could afford treatment, but which treatment was best. Marcus had eventually apologized, genuinely this time, after learning the inheritance's scope. Vanessa had asked for a loan Maya had quietly refused. The filing cabinet sat in climate-controlled storage, its vault empty now, its purpose fulfilled. Uncle Raymond's systematic love, expressed through spreadsheets and bearer bonds and careful documentation, had transformed Maya's life completely. She learned that wealth came in unexpected forms, that watching from a distance could still mean caring deeply, that sometimes the people who seemed most absent were actually paying the closest attention. And every month, when another distribution arrived, Maya remembered Uncle Raymond standing in hospital parking lots, documenting her struggles, building her salvation one careful investment at a time. He'd never learned to say, "I love you" directly, but he'd spent 26 years saying it through compound interest and offshore accounts and a filing cabinet her siblings had called garbage. That, Maya had learned, was family too. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.